Okay, and the conspicuously absent introduction is from myself. And so a few quick words about myself. As you can tell but when you saw me briefly online, I'm relatively old. So I've had quite a long career. In fact, I've had several careers. And my first career was as a journalist. And I was actually a freelance journalist for a grand total of 16 years. And over that period I did business journalism, I did travel journalism, I wrote articles, I did podcasts, I made YouTube films. I've written for The Guardian, The Telegraph, The Independent, and a few magazines and publications that you've probably never heard of. And then about 20 years ago, I started teaching business journalism at Cardiff University, which you may have heard of. And I spent 7 very happy years there. And then I went back to journalism and became a travel journalist again. And then when I came back from my travels, I taught at, I always get this list wrong because it's quite a long one, the University of South Wales, Bedfordshire University, Buckinghamshire New University, Gloucestershire University, and I've been teaching at Roehampton for the last 3 years. So basically I've had 16 years as a journalist and about 20 years as a teacher of journalism. And during the second period I also managed to cram in 6 years of part-time study doing a PhD in journalism at Goldsmiths. So when you put all of our experience together, all 6 or 7 of us who are going to teach on this course this year, we do actually have quite a lot of experience. And I wouldn't say that we know everything about teaching journalism, but we're pretty good. The students who we've seen through to graduation over the years, many of them have gone on to good careers in journalism as well. And I think almost without exception, I'm struggling to find an exception, everybody that we've taught has certainly benefited immensely from the modules that we teach and the encouragement we give and the tips and the guidance that we give as well throughout the teaching. So that's a little bit about me. So this is my 3rd year as a programme convener on MA Journalism, and as I said at the top of the show today, that this year is different to previous years because of COVID, obviously. But just rest assured, folks, that as a team we are very good at coping with difficult circumstances, and we've proved that for the past 6 months or so in the context of COVID. So, and I say this and repeat this because if I were in your position now, I'd probably be concerned, you know, are you going to get good teaching? Are you going to get, dare I say, value for money? And the answer to both of those questions is yes, because your predecessors have certainly been through a similar situation and they've come out on the other side with big smiles on their face and their brains full of wonderful information and knowledge and skills. Okay, so what I'm going to do from now on, for the rest of the show today. Oh, I've just got a question from Unsia. Am I saying it correctly now, Unsia? She's asked for a reading list. I'll come on to that in a moment, Unsia, if you let me just come on to that a bit later on. Okay, and as I said right at the very beginning, we had a few late arrivals. Can everybody make sure that you've got a pen and paper? Because I'm going to be giving you lots of information over the next hour or so. And some of you who've studied at Roehampton, you will know this, so I apologise in advance. A lot of you would have studied at UK universities for your undergrad, so again, a lot of this will be knowledge that you have already. But on this course, we always get international students, which is one of the best things for me about the course, is the diversity of students that we get. We get students of all ethnicities, from all parts of the UK and from all over the world as well. And my job and our job as a group is to make sure that everybody, irrespective of their background or circumstances, gets something significant from the study. So I just need to explain now for the next hour or so how it's going to work. Okay, so first of all, and I've sent some emails recently about the tutorial, the initial tutorial. Hopefully everybody has access to Moodle. On Moodle there is one of the sites is called the MA Journalism Programme site. Now I use this page or this site for information that's relevant to the whole programme. And looking down the list of names, most of you, I think, have already booked your tutorial. Before we started this session, I sent an email that said that 8 people have booked their tutorial. I've still got 8 slots left. So when we finish, please don't do it now, but when we finish this session, can everybody please make sure that you have booked a tutorial which will happen either next Wednesday, the 30th of September, or next Thursday, the 1st of October. So you just need to send me an email, have a look at the program site to see what slots are available, let me know what your preference is, and I'll do my best to accommodate your preference. During the tutorial, it's only going to be a short one, and don't be concerned by that, because literally I just want to meet you and have a quick chat with you, and then a week or so later you'll have a longer tutorial when we can talk in more detail. But what I want to know at the tutorial really is just to understand what your starting point is. So I want to know what your undergrad course was, whether you speak any languages. I think a lot of you might actually speak a second or even a third language. Last year we had a student who spoke 4 languages, which as an English person, it makes me feel very ashamed because most English people only speak 1 language. So if you've got languages, that's a real benefit to cultivate a career in journalism. I also want to know in the tutorial whether you have any journalism experience. It's not mandatory, so if you don't have any, don't worry. But if you have journalism experience, especially if you're an international student, you might have worked in your home country as a journalist already, which is useful. And the other thing I want to know is about your circumstances. By the way, all of this is confidential. I'm not going to tell anybody else, but it's really important that I understand. For example, last year we had 2 students who were single parents. And if you're a parent, that means your first priority is your child. So hence your studies, sometimes they might be difficult. So I need to know what you're coping with. Do you have a long commute, for example? Again, one of the students a couple of years ago, she was looking after her sister's children and her old auntie, who was unfortunately very ill. And also if you have a part-time job. So your circumstances are really important. So I just need to know what you're coping with, what you have to deal with before we start. So that's kind of the point of the tutorial next week. So a quick 10 minutes, everybody needs to have one, just so we can say hello individually, face to face, over Skype, if possible. And I just need to know what your circumstances are and what your life journey has been so far. So that's the tutorial. Moving on. Okay, now this is where you need a pen and paper because you won't remember what I'm going to say now. This is really important as well. Everything's important today, but this is particularly important. Before you have your tutorial, can everybody please write? I want to see how you write, what your writing is like. So I want 400 words. Do it on one side of A4. Email it to me as a PDF. You're all familiar with PDFs, right? Adobe PDF. Make sure you put your name, the date, and the word count, how many words you've written on your submission. Use a standard font. Please don't try and be clever by using those really, artistic, swirly fonts that young people sometimes like to use. And what I want you to do is address within 400 words the following. Why did you choose MA Journalism? Point number 1. Point number 2, how does it tie in with your career goals? So if you want to be a human rights journalist, how do you believe that MA Journalism will help get you there? Give me an example. Point number 3, give me an example of what is good journalism to you. I mean, it's a very personal, subjective thing. What do you think is good journalism? Point number 4, what sort of journalism do you consume? And when I say consume, what I mean is what do you read, what do you watch, what do you listen to if you listen to podcasts or the radio? Social media is arguably journalism, or it can be. So, which Twitter accounts do you follow? And, what's your focus? What really motivates you? And finally, point number 5, who is your journalistic role model and why? So in other words, think of a journalist, your choice. It doesn't matter whether it's male, female, from this country, elsewhere, whether this person works in television or on radio or podcast, you choose. Give me the name of somebody who you really admire, who does journalism, and really somebody who inspires you. So let me just go through those again. Point number 1, why did you choose MA Journalism? Point number 2, how does it tie into your career goals? Point number 3, what is good journalism? Your opinion. Point number 4, what journalism do you consume? And point number 5, who is your journalistic role model and why? So you've got 400 words. Please, and a big request, don't just do it as question, answer, question, answer. My journalistic role model is Louis Theroux because he's blah, 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 blah. Write it as a continuous piece of prose. This is actually quite difficult to do. Which is the reason I'm giving it to you as a mission, because I want to see how you respond to a brief and how you express yourself and how your writing is. So and you're not going to get marked on it. It's not going to be shared with anybody. So don't be shy about the whole thing. But make sure that you do it. Do it before the tutorial. Don't send it 10 minutes before because I won't have a chance to read it. Ideally, you need to send it 1 day before the tutorial. So if your tutorial's on a Wednesday, please send it to me on the Tuesday. If your tutorial's on the Thursday, please send it to me by the Wednesday. Okay, so that's the tutorial and the writing exercise. Has anybody got any questions before I move on? No? Okay, everybody's gone silent. They're dreading it. Everybody's dreading it because, yes, the work starts now. Okay, what I'm going to do now is just share the screen. Because there is quite a lot of information coming up. Okay, can everybody see that? Just say yes, somebody, or just type yes.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. I don't know who that was, but thank you. Okay, so what can you expect with MA Journalism? Well, the key point, and I say this because my experience suggests that some students, when they do an MA, they kind of expect it to be a continuation of the BA, and it's not. I mean, the clue is in the word. M stands for master, B stands for bachelor. Bachelor is a very old and rather sexist word, but what it means is it's almost like think about it as in terms of you're moving up the league tables. So and the metaphor I've used here is it's like the Olympic Games. So if your BA was like the European Championships or the African Championships in football, then what you're doing with an MA is the Olympics. So you're moving up one, you're moving to a higher level, and consequently the standards are higher. So if you were getting 65–70%, in your undergrad, congratulations, they're good scores. But to get 65 or 70 in an MA, your work does need to be appreciably better. And there is a reason for that. We're not just being mean by doing that. There is a good reason for that. And the reason in red at the bottom is that we are accredited by an organisation called the PPA, which stands for the Professional Publishers Association. I'm sure you've read this on the website. We received the accreditation in June 2019. And it was a long drawn out process, and me and Sean and everybody else, we had to demonstrate to the PPA that we teach the right subjects in the right way and we give good feedback on the assessments, and we had to demonstrate that the students are happy, that the auditor interviewed students. He spent a whole day here. And as a consequence of this, we are now one of only 6 universities in the UK that is accredited by PPA for the master's degree. And there's only 3 in London. So it's us, it's Goldsmiths, and it's City. So we are in a pretty select bunch. And to make sure that we get re-accredited next year, we have to maintain those high standards. And what that means is that the teaching has to be high standards, the quantity and quality of work from the student has to be high standards, and our assessments and our feedback and everything else. And the key point here tied into that, because we are accredited and because the standards are high, it is hard work from start to finish. So I just want you to all to know that that's what we kind of expect this year. Obviously we're going to give you lots of help and guidance and support, but ultimately it's you folks that need to do the work. And it's not the same as a BA. Now, hand on heart, I can confess this now because it was such a long time ago. I was a terrible student when I was a BA. I didn't really show up to class very much, and I didn't really pay attention, and consequently I got a pretty average score. If I were to take the same approach on the MA class, the MA course these days, I'd get a very, very low score. So please, what you need to do is up your game. So hopefully you all enjoyed and did well your BA courses. Now the MA course is going to be a step above that. So think about it as moving to the Olympic Games. But don't be freaked out by this, because you will get the support and the teaching and everything else that goes with, and the facilities that go with it. But just be aware that an MA is a significant step above the BA. So next slide, MA Journalism, the facts. Now with MA teaching and BA teaching and any teaching, we assess you based on what you submit. We don't give you a mark because you're a nice person, you know, or we don't mark you down if you're a bit, you know, a bit not nice, or whatever the phrase might be. It's purely assessed on the quality of your work. Something else that we do, and this is something I think the university as a whole doesn't really emphasize enough. The university marketing material tends to sort of focus on, you know, students enjoying the course and getting a lot from it, which is important. But what we try and do here is something else. We want to prepare you for the world of work. Now, the world of work, for any of those of you who've worked in a part-time job or maybe a full-time job will know, the world of work is quite different to the world of education. You know, your boss doesn't ask you if you're enjoying your job, typically, you know, but the university is always interested in students, you know, student feedback, are students enjoying it. So the world of work is actually a bit tougher than the world of education. So we need to prepare you for that. So we will mark you according to what professional expectations are. And things like timekeeping, showing up on time, not skipping class, these things are really, really, really important, because again, they prepare you for the world of work. So we do try and replicate as much as possible, particularly in the journalism project in the summer semester. When those of you who will take it, you'll be producing a magazine. We try and keep that as close to the professional world as possible. The words I've written in red there, the reason I've written them in red, because it's kind of like a warning, really. And I do want to apologise in advance if anybody gets slightly bored at times. So if you've studied journalism at BA level, for example, in the law class, you learned law in the undergrad course. So Sean might teach you something, and you'll say, God, I know that already because I learned it in the undergrad. So I apologise, and I'm sure Sean will apologise for that. But there will be times when you do know what we teach you already. For example, I do a whole session on punctuation. Most people are okay with punctuation. A significant proportion of students are not okay with punctuation. So again, I apologise if my intention is not to patronise you. My intention is to make sure that everybody gets up to the same standard. So sometimes you'll be stressed, sometimes you'll be frustrated, sometimes you'll be confused, you might even be bored from time to time. I apologise in advance for all of those incidences, but they are inevitable to a point, because we have a very diverse class. By my count, we have 11 students, there might be more. Everybody has their own circumstances, their own understanding of journalism. Some people are operating in their second or even third language. So there will be times when you say that, you know, this is a little bit repetitive or frustrating or whatever, and I apologise. However, moving on to the last point on this slide, the skills, the knowledge, the techniques and the confidence that you will gain over the next 12 months will far outweigh any of those negatives that might come along from time to time. So just be aware, there's no such thing as a perfect course. That nowhere in the world is there a perfect course. And every student at some point will get confused. And stress, folks, is a fact of life. And stress happens in the real world of work as well. So that's one of the things that we do is teach you through doing the work how to deal, for example, when you've got 3 deadlines in the same week. That's perfectly normal in the real world of journalism. When I was working in journalism, I'd typically have nothing to do for 2 weeks, then I'd have 3 deadlines on the same day. You know, that's just how it operates. We try not to do that, but there will be time when you have multiple pieces of work that you have to deal with at the same time. Okay, so that's some of the facts about journalism. As I said at the beginning, don't get freaked out by this, because our approach does definitely work. The point of this part of my presentation today is to let you know what to expect. Okay, assessments. Now, to get an MA, you must have 180 credits. So, so basically, the course is divided into into 3 semesters, as you know. Each semester has 60 credits. 3 multiplied by 60 is 180. So each module typically is 20 credits. The final project, whether it's journalism project or dissertation, is 60 credits by itself. And you need to have all of those credits. So in other words, you need to successfully complete each of the modules to get your MA. Typically, although there are exceptions here, 2 to 3 assessments per module. And the last point, again, this is where I'm in danger of patronising you, but I say this because it happens every year. Please don't fail any assessments. And you won't fail if you follow the guidance and you do it without procrastinating and you come to class, and you won't fail the assessments. Because if you follow the guidance and you come to class, you will be fully prepared for it and you will do it successfully. The people who do fail typically are the ones that don't come to class, or they leave it until the last minute. That's kind of what I call the undergrad way of working. And as I said a few minutes ago, that doesn't work at MA level. And if you do fail the assessment, yes, it's a pain for you, but it's a pain for me, and it's a pain for the module tutor. And the university as a bureaucracy goes through this whole system of resits and remarking, and then there's a delay in your mark. So just do everything you possibly can to avoid failing. It's not good in any respect. Although if you do have circumstances, I'll come on to that in a moment, you can get extensions. Finally, and on this part, assessments. Now I put this in here, well, for the benefit of everybody, because even if you've studied at Roehampton before, assessments on MA are different. And for those of you who are coming from international scenarios, for example, in the States, I don't know if we've got any American students, but in the States, I think they tend to use letters, A, B, C, and so on. And in other cultures, I used to teach a lot of Chinese students, and to them, if they got less than 90%, they were very, very ashamed. So I just want to emphasize here how it works. If you get over 70% on a piece of work, then that piece of work gets a distinction. There's no firsts, 2, 1, 2, 2, third. The classifications for MA are distinction, merit, pass and fail. So over 70 is a distinction, between 60 and 69 is a merit, between 50 and 60 is a pass, and below 50 is a fail. Undergrad, it's below 40. So this is what I mean about standards. You need to get above 50 to pass. Okay, and to give you an indication of how likely it is for members of a class to get one of these classifications, this year, we had the year just finishing, I think we've got 11, 12 students. Possibly 1 or maybe 2 will get an overall distinction. So we don't give them away. Like I said at the beginning, you need to earn it and you need to be consistent. Quite a few in the class are on target to hit the merit, and a couple of people are going to get the pass this year probably. And that's quite typical of most years in my experience. So don't think that you're going to automatically, just because you did well at undergrad, you're going to get a distinction. Like I said, this is the Olympic Games. You need to perform consistently to a higher standard to get a distinction. They are quite rare distinctions. But if you follow the guidance and you work hard and you don't procrastinate and you do your reading and you practice, there's no reason that you shouldn't get them and get one. And also my point at the end, a sample of the assessments are moderated internally and externally. I put that on there just to let you know what goes on behind the scenes. It's not just a case of me marking a piece of work and then you sending the mark out. So for example, I could mark some work and then Sean might be what we call the moderator. He will check a sample of my marking and look at my comments and confirm that it's all fair and consistent. And then there's another level of affirmation, if you like. The sample then goes to an external moderator, a professor from another university, who then looks at our samples and confirms that we're being fair and consistent and so on. So behind the scenes there are quite a few checks and balances to make sure that you are treated fairly. And I'm sure some of you know that, but it's worth emphasising for international students. Next slide. So, and I'm sure you're all keen and eager students and you all want to do really, really well. So slide number 13, how to maximise your marks. Make sure you attend every class and be punctual. It sounds really obvious, but you'll be surprised how many students don't really follow that advice. And as I said before, that's kind of like the BA approach. That's like my approach when I was an undergrad, and that's why I got a really bad mark when I was an undergrad. So attend every class and be punctual. As I said at the top of the show today, my preference, and it works really well, is pen and paper. Make notes. You can do it by all means on your laptop if you're a quick typist, but I find that the process of actually putting pen to paper, maybe it's my age, I don't know, is most effective. If you don't understand anything, or if you need anything reiterated, please ask questions. There's no shame in asking a question. Some people think it's a sign of stupidity. I think it's a sign of intelligence, actually, to ask questions. And get involved in the class, get involved in class discussions. You know, journalism is about the real world, and there's plenty happening in the real world at the moment. COVID, climate change, Black Lives Matter, American election, all of these things are covered by journalism and by journalists. So get involved. There's lots of opinion in journalism, there's lots of different approaches, so get involved in that. Third point, and I'm going to come back now to Nsia's question. She said about a reading list. Can I just say at this point, this course, if you read the course description, you'll notice that it's not really what you call an academic course. Obviously it is, because it's at a university and it's a master's degree. Some courses, they look at textbooks and theory and approaches and all that sort of stuff. Ours is very practical. Ours is extremely practical. So what you need to do, so going back to your question, Sia, if you want a course textbook, I would say BBC News website, or the Guardian website, or a combination of the two. The course textbooks for me in journalism, the way I learned to be a journalist was by consuming journalism. I've read journalism textbooks. I personally think most of them are awful, really, really bad. And I think the best way to do it, and Sean might disagree with me here, but I think the best way to do it is to read a lot, to consume a lot, learn by your mistakes. Obviously, sign up for a great course like MA Journalism at Roehampton. But the course textbooks, I would say, are the real world journalism. Maximise your marks by following the assessment guidance and criteria. Every single one of my colleagues is very, very keen on giving you a precise assessment guidance and criteria. And in my modules, I will give you a document that says, this is the criteria. And if you follow the criteria and you do it well, you'll get a good mark. Again, students who ignore part of the criteria don't get good marks. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty common sense, really. And finally, read the feedback and learn from your mistakes. Again, you'll be amazed how many students don't do that. They look at the mark they've got and then they get upset and they don't read the comments. And then the next piece of work, they make exactly the same mistakes and they get the same mark. You know, so nobody expects you to show up on day one as being the fully formed, perfect journalist. Nobody is. Even somebody like me or Sean, who've been doing it half their lives, we still make mistakes when we do journalism. But make sure you read the feedback. You can have a tutorial to discuss it further if you want, but just learn from your mistakes and your marks will be greatly improved. Okay, let's move on. Okay, I just want to go through, I think you all know this now. I'm going to talk now about the structure of the course. So I think most of you are full-time. I know that there's one student, Aga, who's coming back from last year. She's part-time. I think everybody else is full-time. If not, I'll just move on with this. You can tell me later whether I think most people are full-time. So full-time, so 3 modules in the autumn semester, legal and ethical, journalism, portfolio and feature writing, and then in the spring, 2nd semester, we have social media and data journalism, digital reportage, and journalism, enterprise and employability. And then in the summer term, you have a choice. You can either do a dissertation or you can do the journalism project. The journalism project is a magazine. You will actually make a magazine as a piece of group work with your colleagues and produce a paper magazine and an online electronic version with social media and so on. Let's not worry too much about that at the moment. The other thing just to bear in mind and to be very aware of is that this course includes an internship as well. So you do need, we have a very late arrival, excuse me a minute, we do need you do need to remember that the internship happens typically in the summer term as well. I'll talk more about internships in a moment, But just be aware, and again, some people kind of neglect this simple fact. This is a 12-month course. BA courses typically finish about June, and then you've got the whole summer to work or enjoy yourself or go on vacation. The MA is a 12-month course. The part-time option, which I think only applies to one person, it might be more. So this year, the part-timer from last year, Aga, you're going to be doing feature writing and long-form journalism in autumn, and then you do 2 modules in the spring, and then you will also need to do either a dissertation or a journalism project plus your internship. So it really is full on. It really is 12 months of learning and assessments and so on. Okay, let's just talk briefly about the summer term. So as I said, the choices are as follows. Number 1, you can do a dissertation. Your dissertation is an individual project and it's 15,000 words. There are 2 assessment points. As I remember, the first one is in May next year, which is kind of a methodology chapter. And the second one will be later in the summer, date to be confirmed. That's a dissertation. The other option, as I said, is a journalism project where you will produce a magazine with your classmates, or we might subdivide it into 2 groups of 5, or it might be 1 group of 10. It depends what sort of numbers we have and so on. But the second option is the journalism project. Now let's wait on this one. Let's just have a think about it, folks, between now and your second tutorial. Not the first one, but the second one, the more detailed tutorial that you will have sometime in October. And then you can tell me what your thoughts are on it. It's completely up to you which option you take. I'm not going to pressurize you to go either way. You need to be comfortable with it. It needs to tie in with the rest of your life, obviously. For example, one of the students last year, she was a single mum, and she found that the dissertation suited her life better because kids are unpredictable and they need constant care and love and attention. So she did a dissertation for that reason. So you might have other reasons you might want to do a dissertation. If you want to go on and do a PhD, for example, a dissertation would be good preparation for that. Or you might just have a deep intellectual interest in some element of journalism. So dissertation might be the right way forward for you. If you want to work in the magazine industry, do journalism project. No hesitation. It'll give you the skills and the experience of working together. I will need a final decision on this, folks, at the end of November. So I will ask you then, before then, remind you that you need to make a decision. And please don't, it happens every year, but please don't change your mind after November, because the bureaucracy, the university bureaucracy that I love and so much, I don't actually, it frustrates me, but the university bureaucracy doesn't really cope very well with people changing their minds. It just means a lot of paperwork from my point of view. So please, when you make a decision, please try and stick to it, but put plenty of thought in it before you do. So that's the summer. We don't need to worry about it now, but just have in your mind dissertation or project. So a question that you might be asking, and students every year do, you get, in normal times you will have 9 hours of contact time in class. It's going to be organised slightly differently this year. But if you work out 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, that's 168 hours. Only 9 hours of it are in class. So that means you've got 159 hours of your life every week left. And what are you going to do with this time? Obviously sleep for about 1/3 of it. It's really important. Socialising, working for money. But the one thing which MA students sometimes neglect and underestimate is this thing called independent learning. And this is one of the big differences between an MA and a BA. As an MA, you are all mature adults, so you can make your own decisions about how you run your life and how you spend your time. We can't insist on this, but I strongly, strongly suggest that you bear this in mind. The MA golden rule, and I forget where I read this, but it was on some official document somewhere. And it says, for every hour you spend in class, you should devote an additional 3 hours to independent learning. So this is why a course that is a mere 9 hours of class is called a full-time course. Because 9 multiplied by 3 is 27. 27 plus 9 in class is 36. So really, if you want to do really well at an MA, you should be devoting about 36 hours a week to your studies. And now that might shock and horrify you, but if you were thinking, oh, you just show up for 9 hours and then go and do your part-time job and socialise with your boyfriend for the rest of the week. That's probably not going to be sufficient. What do I mean by independent study? Well, obviously assessments. I also recommend that if you want to be a writer, a journalism who writes, that you practice writing every day. I mean, these days it's so easy and cheap and simple. Set up a blog and just practice your writing. Reading, journalism, academic work, etc. Watching journalism, listening to radio and podcasts and so on. Social media, and I don't mean chit-chatting about the Kardashians or whatever, but I mean professional, proper, serious social media, engaging with people on Twitter and on Instagram and so on. Researching possible internships, looking at job websites in the media, and meeting people, if possible, in real life. And I've given you there on the right-hand side an example of some of the examples of what I consider quality journalism or stimulating journalism to be. So if you ever get stuck, this comes back to Nsia's question about reading list. There's a reading list. BBC News website. It's free. It's huge. It's got every part of the world covered. You might not agree with how the BBC does it, but at the end of the day, they do have some very good journalism on there. BBC Radio 4. Not many people of your generation listen to Radio 4. It's what Americans call talk radio, but it's intelligent and detailed and wide-ranging. BBC World Service, if you're interested in international issues. Vice News, which gives more of a young person's view of the world. There's loads of new news websites like The Canary. A couple of famous journalists there that I really like, Louis Theroux, Stacey Dooley. Their work is free on BBC iPlayer. So there's no excuse about having to pay for it. You don't need a Netflix subscription. It's free on BBC iPlayer. And two magazines that I read, The New Statesman and The Week. And there's many, many, many more examples. So independent learning, it's up to you to go out there and do it. I can recommend, Sean can recommend, we can all recommend good journalism, but you need to do it on a weekly basis. You need to engage with journalism. And I always use the metaphor at this point. If you're going to be a musician, if you want to be a guitarist, you don't just show up to your guitar class. You'll be listening to guitar music. You'll be reading biographies about guitarists and so on. It's the same with journalism. If you want to be a journalist, you have to consume it. Moving on to the next slide. Top left there is Sean's the book that Sean recommends, which is essentially the textbook for the law module, McNay's Essential Law for Journalism. I also suggest that you join an organisation called the National Union of Journalists. You can get student membership. I think it's 25 quid for a year, which sounds like a huge amount of money, but compared to a Netflix subscription, an NUJ membership will pay you back many times over the years. I've been a member for over 20 years. I think Sean is a member or was a member, and I got more work as a freelancer through people I met through the NUJ than any other route. It's basically a professional organisation where journalists get together. And it's been around for many years, and it's the top professional organisation. Check it out. Find the London branch. It's online. Find it. Join it. Go along. Get involved. Meet people. It will change your life. I promise you. Twitter. By all means, set up a professional account. I say professional account. Don't mix your personal with your professional. So don't have a tweet about somebody's new dress next to some serious comment about the BBC's reporting of the American election. I would suggest that you have a separate professional account that your friends, your mates are not involved in. By all means have one for all the social chit-chat you do, but don't confuse the two. And you can also follow other Twitter accounts. Sleuth is a magazine which your predecessors 2 years ago produced. There's also a Twitter account called You Are Journalist, University of Roehampton Journalist, and also add editors and journalists in your areas of interest and stay engaged with them to see what they're discussing and talking about. A couple of books which I recommend if you're interested in the BBC. The Myth of the Public Service by Tom Mills. The book next to that is an absolute classic if you want to understand the development of particularly the print media over the past 100 years or so. Power Without Responsibility, co-written incidentally by my PhD supervisor, Professor James Curran. And the other recommendation I'd make is read journalists' autobiographies. You can learn a heck of a lot about what it's like to be a journalist by reading a journalist's story. One that I particularly enjoyed and was enlightened by was a guy called John Snow, who is a senior journalist for Channel 4 News. But you need to go out there and find them. You find your journalistic role model, see if he or she has written an autobiography, buy it, read it, and be inspired by it. So going back to Nsia's question, there is no formal reading list, but there are plenty of good books to read about journalism. Internships, let me just give you a rough idea of what to expect in about, well, later down the track. What the module description says is that to successfully complete the course, you need to engage with internships for 30 days. Now, last year I wrote a very detailed document, which I will give you at some point, which explains what that means. It doesn't mean that you have to do an internship for 30 days. What we're looking for is about 120 hours of real work. And what you have to do when you submit it is you submit what we call an activity diary, which is a table that says March the 6th, applied for internships, 2 hours work. March the 7th, did some research for an article, 8 hours work. So you can actually accumulate your hours as you go along. And you need to accumulate a total of 120 hours. Typically that will be spread over a whole month. That's the 30 days of engagement. But you'll still be doing other things at the time. You might have a part-time job. You might be doing the journalism project or your dissertation. So that's what we're looking for. When do you need to do it? I always say to students, start as soon as possible. Don't start right now, but there's no reason why you can't do a couple of days of internship this year before January, and then do a couple more in January, a couple more in February. If you leave it, as one of the students did this year, until August, you're going to struggle. So please, please, please don't procrastinate. You can do single or multiple organisations. You don't have to do it all at one organisation. You can do freelance journalism as well as journalism in the traditional sense. And you'll be assessed on this in JEE, Journalism, Enterprise and Employability, the module. So at the end of the year, the very last piece of work you'll submit is a internship report. It's 2,500 words, and it's a reflection on your experiences during your internship. So a few more notes there about the reasons you do it. You have to I've explained it as you have to feel the pain. Applying for jobs and not getting them, it happens to all of us. Before I got this job, I think I applied for 15 jobs. So being rejected is part of the human condition, and that's one of the reasons you have to do an internship, is to learn how to deal with that. It's not nice, it's not enjoyable, but it's part of life. That's what I mean about preparing you for the world of work. It also helps you develop resilience and interpersonal skills, how to get along with people, and it also encourages you to learn from your mistakes. And throughout the process, I will provide advice on suitability. Don't, for example, get a job in advertising sales, because they will work you to death for no money whatsoever, and that is not journalism. Just be aware from this slide what you need to do later in the year. But again, we can talk about that during the tutorials. Just a few more random things to finish off here, folks. Enrolment, I'm going to ask this rhetorically. I hope you've all enrolled. I hope you've all signed up for modules. If you have, my mission next is to approve them. So don't worry if you don't have access to modules right now. That's something that's on my to-do list to do this week and next week. Classes start in 2 weeks' time, week commencing the 5th of October, so don't worry about anything, about accessing the Moodle sites until then. Next slides. Just a quick point about assessment deadlines. Assessment deadlines, they are fixed. We don't actually have a huge amount of latitude in moving them around. However, a big however here, if you have, God forbid, an illness or a family issue that needs your full attention, or something else that comes up unexpectedly, you can apply for something called mitigating circumstances, which basically means that something's popped up, which means that you can't do your work. If that happens, the thing to do is to speak to your module tutor, apply for mitigating circumstances through the website, and that will give you a deadline extension. Okay, so if you don't think that if you're ill you have to work through it. We are quite human at times like that. Some do's: do use a schedule to organise your time. It will get hectic, particularly at the end of the semesters. Don't procrastinate. That's the message I keep coming back to. That's the BA way of working. Don't procrastinate. And also one other do not arrange work shifts or vacations until you've checked and double checked your lecture and assessment schedules. Particularly those of you who might be flying back home if you're an international student, make sure that you know what your assessment schedule is before you book your flight. And I know that flights are always cheaper if you book in advance, but make sure that you book your check your assessment schedules first. Next slide, Moodle. I'm sure you're all familiar with Moodle. Excuse me. Moodle is the online central resource of learning materials. There is a Moodle page for each of the modules. So Sean has one for legal and ethical. Juan has one for journalism portfolio. Adam has one for feature writing, and there's also one for MA journalism program. So that program site is going to have all the general information on it. There will be loads of material on there, particularly this year with COVID. But it is not a substitute for turning up to class, and the reason being that in class you can interact and ask questions and ask for repetition and get involved in the debate. There's no substitute for that, so please don't think that you can just do it from Moodle. A couple more things just to finish off. If you have a problem, hopefully you won't, but if you do, there are procedures in place. If you have an issue with a module, your point of contact is the module tutor. So if you have questions about legal and ethical, don't come to me. I know nothing about these things. Sean's the person you need to speak to. If you've got a question about journalism portfolio, it's Juan and Ping. If it's a question about feature writing, it's Adam. If you've got a question or a problem about the course, the program as a whole, that's GJM, that's me, Gary James Merrill. With the university as a whole, the best thing to do really is to come to me first, because the university is a strange beast and it's multi-headed and there's loads of different departments, and sometimes I don't understand it. But if you've got a question, for example, I don't know what that example might be, but whatever it might be about the university, come to me first. With your studies in general, come to me or your AGT. AGT, incidentally, stands for Academic Guidance Tutor, and I will allocate those to you in October. The reason we're going to wait for that is because I still don't know how many students we have. There's 11 in the room right now, but according to another list I've seen, we might have 20. So until we know who shows up, because we're never quite sure until they show up, I won't be able to allocate the AGTs. Any other issues, go to me or the AGT. And make sure, this is a real top tip for the top, make sure you use the university services. So your fees, they don't just pay for my time and Sean's time and the teaching, they also pay for things like English language support, the library, student counselling, financial, the student finance office, they can give you advice. So make sure you use all of these things, and of course the social side of the university. There's an organisation called the Academic Achievement Team, so if you want help with writing your essays, if English isn't your first language, for example, and you're having trouble with structuring and phrasing, go and see them. Student wellbeing, if you're excessively stressed or homesick or any of those normal things that happen to human beings, get involved with student wellbeing. And just one caveat on the right hand side, and the reason I mention this, I've seen it not at Roehampton but at other universities, where students have used social media to express their dissatisfaction. I say that very politely, but you know what I'm talking about here. So if you get a low mark, for example, don't go straight to Twitter and say, I hate Gary, he's an idiot, right? But essentially that's what I saw at another university, and it caused all sorts of problems. I don't personally have a problem if you think I'm an idiot, I really don't. But don't put it on Twitter, because it just causes so many problems, and don't put it on Instagram either. And finally, in the yellow box there, if you are advised to sort out issues yourself, you're all adults. The next step after an MA is your career. So we're trying to teach you to be self-sufficient and to be to look after yourselves. Try and sort it out yourself. If you can't sort it out yourself, come to me or come to one of the module tutors. I'm happy to give guidance, but at the end of the day, it is for you to sort out. One more thing to think about, the programme board. Twice a year we have a meeting, the staff and 2 student representatives get together and we talk about the programme so far, what's good about it, what can be improved. Students are welcome to throw ideas at us. It doesn't mean we can adopt them. Sometimes we're restricted in terms of what we can do, but we'll certainly consider them. So at some point we will need 2 representatives from your group. Don't think about it too much now. but you will sort of vote just like a normal democratic election, and 2 of you will represent the class at the programme board. So this is what's called student voice. So this is something that we take very seriously. One final note about combining study and work. If you're anything like previous groups of students, particularly if you're Londoners and you're living in your family home, you're probably going to be having a part-time job and doing your studies as well. Just remember what I said, this is a full-time course. So you've got 36 hours really of work to do that you need to combine with your part-time job at Costa Coffee or wherever it is. It is tough, and we understand it's necessary because, you know, we don't tend to teach privileged students. Most of our students come from quite humble backgrounds and they need to work. But just be aware that it is quite difficult. It might look easy on paper to do 6 hours a day at Costa Coffee and 6 hours in class, but that's 12 hours plus commuting. That's a lot of work. So just be aware that it's going to be possibly tougher than you expect it to be. And if you start struggling, come and see me. Send me an email, we can have a tutorial and we can deal with it. And yes, and one more thing before I finish. The 10th hour. I'll send you an email in a couple of weeks for a session I call the 10th hour. So in the first semester I give a few of these classes. The first one is probably going to be about internships. The second one will be about dissertation versus journalism project. The third one we might have a visiting speaker. So this is an extra hour on top of your contact time, which gives you a little bit of a boost, a bit of an extra dimension. And finally, let's just very quickly go through 10 top tips. A lot of alliteration there. 10 top tips for making the most of your time on MA journalism. Excuse me, just had a drink. Firstly, show up on time. Make sure you balance your work, your study and your life. Secondly, make sure that you consume journalism. Analyse it and critique it. Critique it in a positive way. You know, that BBC News report was good, but it could have been better if. Start thinking about internships. Who do you want to work for? Do you want to work in radio, TV, online? Do you want to work in newspapers? What sort of organisation? Do you want to work in the UK, overseas? Do you want to work in your first language, your second language? What sort of thing do you want to do? Make sure that you write stuff down with pen and paper or laptop if you're good at typing. Make sure, number 5, that you check your university email every day because stuff is coming up all the time. So or Sean or somebody might contact you at short notice. Make sure you use your university email. I say university email because there's always one student who insists on using their Hotmail account. We don't do that. It's university email only. If you have any issues, problems, doesn't matter what it is, within reason, you know, if you break a shoelace, don't come running to me, obviously. You know, but if it's anything to do with the course or with the university or life in general, or if you're an international and you get a bit homesick or whatever, don't worry, we're here. We can help you out. Number 7, part of the course, what we're encouraging you to do is take responsibility and learn how to be self-sufficient, because the next step in 12 months' time is the big bad world of real-life journalism work. Number 8, build your journalistic portfolio wherever possible. So start a blog. If you're an international, what a great opportunity. Write a blog about living in a foreign country. That's good practice. Write it in English as well, obviously. And also think about your end of year reference. At the end of the year, you'll probably need a reference from me or Sean or Juan or 2 or 3 of us. And I say this is just a fear of mine. It's never really, well, it happened once actually, which I'll tell you about twice. I'll tell you about another time, where somebody at the end of the year has asked me for a reference, and that person for the previous 12 months has been rude, late, hasn't shown up, complained about everything. And I have this habit when I write references of telling the truth. I mean, I'm diplomatic, but I do have to tell the truth. So just, I mean, the key phrase, isn't it? It's treat people as you would like to be treated. So make sure that you're polite and courteous and all that sort of stuff. It goes a long, long way, and you'll need those skills when you're a journalist. People always respond to journalists who are nice and courteous and polite. And point number 10, last but not least, don't worry. As I said right at the top of this presentation, we've got difficult circumstances, but we've proven this approach through March through September of last year. And we can do it, and it's going to be great, and you're all going to finish in 12 months' time with wonderful degrees, loads of experience, loads of skills, and more confident than you are already. Okay, that's me finished. Any questions?